The aircraft was observed executing a sharp bank, its wings grazing a bridge before plunging into the water. Notably, a fragment of the plane struck a taxi, resulting in the driver being hospitalized. Tragically, over 30 individuals lost their lives, while more than a dozen survived. The search for the missing bodies is ongoing. What was intended to be a routine flight transformed into a disaster within a mere 3.5 minutes. A sequence of events unfolded, culminating in a catastrophic crash in the Kyong River, which fragmented the aircraft into debris. Of the 58 people on board, including 4 crew members and 39 passengers, 43 perished instantly. What transpired during those critical 3.5 minutes? What chain of events led to this calamity? Let us revisit that moment to comprehend the circumstances. This is the account of Transasia Airways Flight 235. On February 4, 2015, at 10:45 a.m. local time, Transasia Flight 235 was pushed back from the gate, destined for Kinmen, an island situated off the coast of Taiwan. The journey from San Airport in Taipei to Kinmen Island typically lasts between 50 to 60 minutes. The aircraft involved in this incident was an ATR-72-600, a more modern variant compared to the ATR-72-500, both utilized by Transasia Airways, which generally accommodates 68 to 78 passengers. This specific aircraft was manufactured in 2014 and had accumulated approximately 1,600 flight hours prior to the incident. It was powered by 2 Pratt & Whitney engines on the day of the accident. The review indicated that ongoing deficiencies in critical areas were not sufficiently addressed, which posed a potential safety risk. Accompanying him in the right seat was Captain Liu Such-chong, aged 45, who had accumulated nearly 7,000 flying hours, with 794 of those hours on the ATR-72-600. Also present in the cockpit, seated in the jump seat, was 63-year-old First Officer Peking Chong, who was participating in an observation flight as part of his training and had over 16,000 flying hours, including 8 hours on the ATR-72-600. After starting both engines, they commenced taxiing towards the runway for departure and were instructed to adhere to the Musha to Quebec departure procedure, which required a right turn and a climb to 5,000 feet. Furthermore, the departure procedure included an engine-out standard instrument departure, EOSID, a designated route for aircraft that experience engine failure shortly after takeoff. In such cases, pilots must follow this route to navigate safely around potential obstacles that could be challenging to manage with only one operational engine. During taxiing, there were several discussions between the pilot monitoring and the first officer, during which the pilot monitoring elaborated on the differences between the ATR-72-600 and the 72,500 model. However, this communication did not comply with the sterile cockpit rule, which prohibits non-essential conversations during taxiing. Despite the intention to educate the observer pilot about the aircraft systems as part of his training, these extended discussions became a source of distraction. The absence of a suitable pre-takeoff briefing has contributed to the misunderstanding of this incident. To fully comprehend the situation, we will first present a version of the accident, accompanied by explanatory animations and definitions of technical terms. Subsequently, we will provide a second version of the event, this time omitting the animations and definitions, to illustrate the rapidity of the occurrences. At 10:51 local time, the aircraft commenced its takeoff roll from runway 10. Merely 4 seconds into the roll, the monitoring pilot observed an anomaly. The automatic takeoff control system, a TCS, was not armed. Despite both pilots recognizing the takeoff inhibit warning, the pilot in command opted not to abort the takeoff, directing the crew to continue as planned. The rationale behind this decision remains unclear. it is conceivable that the pilot's considerable experience with the ATR 72-500, where continuation of takeoff was permissible under certain circumstances, influenced his judgment at that moment. The ATC-ES is an essential feature in aircraft designed to assist pilots during takeoff. Once activated, it monitors the power output of both engines. If it detects a loss of power in one engine, indicating a potential failure, the ATC-ES automatically engages the autofeather unit. This unit promptly adjusts the position of the affected engine's propeller to a feathered position, thereby minimizing drag, a process referred to as auto-feathering. In addition to this, the ATC-ES enhances the power of the operational engine by approximately 10%, significantly augmenting the aircraft's takeoff performance. In the case of the ATR 72-500, pilots were still permitted to proceed with the takeoff under certain conditions. The takeoff was complicated by difficulties in arming the automatic thrust control system. At TCSES, however, this method was deemed unsafe for the ATR 72-600, necessitating a rejected takeoff if the ATCs could not be armed. Regrettably, TransAsia Airways and ATR failed to effectively communicate this critical distinction to their pilots, a communication breakdown that would have severe consequences leading up to the accident. Shortly after takeoff, the landing gear was retracted once the aircraft reached a positive rate of climb. As the aircraft ascended, the crew engaged the autopilots, setting an altitude of 5,000 feet and an airspeed of 115 knots. The Songshan Tower controller then instructed the flight crew to contact the tie approach while the aircraft initiated a right turn, climbing through an altitude of 1,000 feet. As the aircraft continued its right turn and climbed past 1,200 feet, a master warning sounded in the cockpit, and the Engine 2 flameout procedure was displayed on the engine warning panel. Unbeknownst to the pilots, the auto-feather unit for engine number 2 had malfunctioned due to manufacturing quality issues, specifically defective soldering joints. This malfunction triggered the automatic takeoff power control system sequence, resulting in the unintended auto-feathering of engine number 2's propellers, which adjusted to a position that minimized drag. Concurrently, engine number 1 was in an up-trim condition with its bleed valve closed, thereby increasing the power of the operational engine. Moments later, the ATC-EC sequence concluded, and the right engine was fully feathered, ceasing to provide any thrust as the aircraft continued its ascent. At an altitude of 1,300 feet, the autopilot disengaged, and the pilot in command assumed control of the aircraft. There were no verbal communications or announcements made by the flight crew concerning the autopilot's disconnection. The Aviation Safety Council's report states that the pilot intentionally deactivated the autopilot during flight. In contrast, the Civil Aeronautics Administration, now known as the FAA, suggests that simulations of the incident under identical conditions revealed that the autopilot disengaged autonomously, rather than through any action by the flight crew. Typically, the autopilot is designed to handle an engine failure. However, the necessity for manual control heightened the stress levels for the crew. The pilot in command retracted the throttle of engine 1, momentarily paused to cross-check, but failed to execute the engine failure identification procedure. Consequently, the pilot reduced the power lever of engine 1 from 75% to 66%, a modification that went unnoticed by the monitoring captain. This action was peculiar, given that engine 1 was the only operational engine. It seems the pilot mistakenly identified engine 1 as the one experiencing failure. Both the pilot flying and the pilot monitoring confirmed the activation of heading mode and proceeded with the flight. As the aircraft continued its ascent, the selected heading was adjusted to 92 degrees, while the pilot flying continued to turn left. The pilot then conducted a series of checks: engine flame out, check, 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 Check chirp, trim. Yes. Auto feather. Yes, watch the speed. The indicated airspeed had decreased to 101 knots, which was 14 knots below the selected airspeed and only a few knots above the stall warning threshold. The first officer operating the aircraft retracted the power lever of Engine 1 to 49. Subsequently, Engine 2 experienced a confirmed flameout. At this point, the aircraft had ascended to an altitude of 1,630 feet, the highest recorded for that flight. The indicated airspeed mode automatically disengaged and switched to pitch hold mode due to insufficient engine power to maintain the climb in the terrain ahead. Following the initial stall warning, the alert persisted for 4 seconds, accompanied by the activation of the stick shaker's mechanical devices designed to provide tactile feedback to pilots as the aircraft approaches an aerodynamic stall. When engaged, the stick shakers vibrate the control column, prompting the pilot to take necessary corrective measures to avert a stall. The pilot flying then responded by adjusting the power lever of Engine 2 to 86 and reducing the power lever of Engine 1 to the idle position. The aircraft continued a steady left turn with a bank angle of 10 to 20 degrees, descending rapidly at an airspeed of 101 knots. The pilot monitoring, overwhelmed by the volume of information to process in a brief period, experienced confusion. To exacerbate the situation, the stick shakers and stick pushers activated once more. The pilot flying subsequently shut down Engine 1, and 6 seconds later, the propellers reached the feathered position, resulting in the loss of both engines. A mayday call was issued. The aircraft experienced an engine flameout, causing it to bank to the right. The flight crew made 2 attempts to engage the autopilot, both of which were unsuccessful. The situation escalated as both engines lost power, leading to a complete engine failure. They were flying at an altitude of 545 feet and an airspeed of 105 knots. The crew attempted to restart the engines 7 times, but failed to identify and rectify the power loss in a timely manner. During one of the restart attempts, the aircraft stalled and began to bank to the left from an altitude that was insufficient for recovery. In a critical error, the crew retracted the throttle on the incorrect side, resulting in the left wing colliding with a taxi on the overpass and subsequently striking a fence. Following these impacts, the aircraft continued to bank left and ultimately entered the river in an inverted position. Let us revisit the beginning of the incident and observe it again, this time without animations or technical details. This method provides a raw and unfiltered view, enhancing our understanding of the rapid sequence of events. The ATCS was not armed initially, but it was later confirmed to be armed for takeoff. The crew proceeded with the takeoff, despite the initial concerns. As the situation unfolded, they monitored the engine throttle and cross-checked the heading mode, ensuring that all necessary checks were performed, including engine flameout protocols and auto-feather settings. The initial speed pullback was executed, followed by confirmation of engine flameout number 2. The terrain ahead was assessed, indicating a low altitude. The crew was instructed to push back, but a moment of hesitation occurred regarding the throttle settings. Engine number 1 was feathered and subsequently shut down, leading to a mayday situation due to the flameout. Both engines were lost, resulting in a critical situation. Attempts to restart the engine were made, but the incorrect throttle adjustments contributed to the aircraft's impact with the river, which caused it to disintegrate into multiple fragments. This tragic event led to the immediate loss of 43 lives out of the 58 individuals on board, including 4 crew members and 39 passengers. Additionally, 13 passengers and 1 cabin crew member suffered serious injuries, while 1 passenger experienced minor injuries. The collision with a taxi on the overpass resulted in severe injuries to the taxi driver and minor injuries to the sole passenger in the taxi. Despite the dire circumstances, survivors managed to exit the aircraft. Fortunately, Both the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder were recovered in good condition. The accident was attributed to several factors, including a malfunction in the auto-feathering unit of engine number 2, which caused uncommanded feathering during takeoff. The pilot mistakenly reduced power on the operational engine number 1 and ultimately shut it down. During this process, the flight crew employed non-standard procedures and callouts amidst a noisy cockpit environment filled with frequent stall warnings. This situation hindered their ability to systematically evaluate and comprehend the loss of thrust from engine number 2. The complete loss of engine power, coupled with the aircraft's pitch attitude, caused the angle of attack to reach the stall warning threshold, leading to a stall from which recovery was not possible. This incident marked the airline's second fatal accident within a year, following the tragedies of Flight 222 and Flight 235 involving Trans-Asia Airways.